The scent of sugar and melting wax hung in the air, a sweet, triumphant perfume. Sarah Miller watched her son, Leo, stare at the single candle flickering atop his small, lopsided cake. His brow was furrowed in a look of profound concentration, his chubby hands patting the high-chair tray in a syncopated rhythm. He was 1 year old today. One perfect, miraculous year. "Make a wish, buddy," Ben said, his voice a low, warm rumble beside her. He squeezed her shoulder, and the simple gesture was an anchor, a physical confirmation of the life they had built. Sarah's heart swelled, a familiar ache of gratitude that still caught her by surprise. The years of sterile clinics, hushed, apologetic doctors, and the quiet grief that had settled over their marriage like a fine dust. It all felt like a story that had happened to someone else. Leo was their happy ending. His laughter was the sound of their healing. His presence was the proof that their dream had not died, but had simply found a different path to them. Ben leaned in, his handsome face illuminated by the candlelight, and helped Leo blow. The tiny flame sputtered and died, and the small group of friends and family erupted in applause. Leo squealed, delighted by the noise, and smeared a fistful of blue frosting across his face. "There's my little masterpiece," Ben chuckled, grabbing a napkin. He cleaned Leo's face with a tenderness that still made Sarah's breath catch. He was born for this. The way he held Leo, the way he could discern the subtle difference between a hungry cry and a tired one. He was the perfect father, more than she had ever dared to hope for. Later, after the last guests had departed, and Leo was sleeping soundly in his crib, a peaceful silence fell over the house. Sarah walked through the living room, collecting stray paper plates and balled-up wrapping paper. Ben was at the kitchen counter, sorting through the day's mail. "Bills, junk, oh, this looks important," he said, holding up a thick manila envelope. The return address was for the Northgate Adoption Agency. "Says file correction and finalization." He tapped it against his palm. "Probably just the last bit of paperwork. I'll get to it tomorrow." He placed the envelope on the corner of his sleek architect's desk in the open-plan living space, sliding it neatly beside a stack of blueprints. Sarah nodded, her mind already on the laundry. It was just another piece of their story, a final bureaucratic stamp on their new reality. That night, Sarah lay in bed, listening to the soft, even breathing of her husband beside her. Sleep wouldn't come. Her mind was too full, replaying the day's highlights. Leo's delighted shriek, the feel of his small, sticky hand in hers, the proud look on Ben's face. She felt a restless energy, a happiness so profound it vibrated under her skin. She didn't want the day to end. Slipping out from under the covers, she padded barefoot into the quiet living room. Moonlight streamed through the large picture window, painting silver stripes across the hardwood floor. Her eyes fell on Ben's desk, on the crisp edge of the manila envelope. "I'll get to it tomorrow," he'd said. But Sarah felt a sudden, practical urge to be done with it, to file the last piece of the puzzle away. It would be a symbolic act, closing the chapter on the process and leaving only the joy. She carefully slid the metal clasp open, the sound unnaturally loud in the silent house. Inside was a small stack of papers. The cover letter was standard fare, citing a clerical error in their initial file and providing updated copies for their records. The first few documents were duplicates of things she'd seen before: legal notices, fee confirmations. Then she pulled out a single sheet, a corrected birth certificate summary. Her eyes scanned the familiar boxes. Child's name, Leo Miller Carter. Date of birth, a year ago to the day. Adoptive parents, Sarah Miller and Benjamin Carter. The day. Everything was as it should be. She was about to slide it back into the envelope when her gaze caught on a line near the bottom. A line that had been a stark, black redacted bar in all their previous copies. The agency was famously strict about closed adoptions. But here, under the heading Birth Mother, was a name: Jessica Riley. The name didn't register at first. It was just letters, black ink on white paper. But then a flicker, a memory from a different life. A life before Leo, before the clinics, before the quiet grief. A name Ben had mentioned once, long ago, in a story about a college road trip. Sarah's breath hitched. Her blood ran cold. A sudden, shocking frost in the warm, moonlit room. Jessica Riley, Ben's ex-girlfriend from college. The one he'd dated for 2 years. The one he claimed he hadn't seen or spoken to in over a decade. She stood frozen, the paper trembling in her hand. The silence of the house was no longer peaceful. It was suffocating, heavy with unspoken questions. She looked from the name on the page to the closed door of the nursery where her son was sleeping. The perfect day, the perfect father, the perfect life. It all fractured. The joyful memories of the last year turning to ice and splintering in her veins. Her life, she realized with a sickening, gut-wrenching certainty, was a lie. The paper felt like a burning coal in Sarah's hand. She forced herself to slide it back into the envelope, her movements stiff and robotic. She placed it exactly as Ben had left it, a neat rectangle of poison on his desk. She retreated to the bedroom, slipping back under the covers, but the warmth was gone. Her side of the bed felt like a frozen lake. Ben stirred, murmuring something in his sleep, and Sarah flinched away, the innocent sound of his voice now grating and foreign. "It's a coincidence," a desperate voice in her head whispered. "Riley is a common name. Jessica is a common name." But the excuse was flimsy, a paper shield against a battering ram of doubt. Ben hadn't just mentioned a Jessica Riley. He'd told her stories. Jessica who loved art history. Jessica who convinced him to spend a semester in Spain. Jessica, who, according to him, had broken his heart before he met Sarah. A name with a history. The next morning was a masterclass in deception. Sarah moved through their routine, making coffee, feeding Leo, kissing Ben goodbye at the door, with a smile plastered on her face. It felt like a mask, brittle and thin, threatening to crack with every word. "You okay? You seem quiet," Ben asked, pausing with his hand on the doorknob. "Just tired." "Big day yesterday," she said, her voice a pitch higher than usual. He accepted it easily, kissing her forehead. "Get some rest. I love you." The words, which usually wrapped around her like a warm blanket, felt like chains. As soon as his car pulled out of the driveway, Sarah's facade crumbled. She strapped a babbling Leo into his playpen and went straight to her laptop, her fingers flying across the keyboard. She typed Jessica Riley and their old university's name into a search engine. The results were sparse at first. A professional profile for an art gallery assistant in another state. A few public records. Then she switched to social media. She found an old, barely used account under that name. The profile picture was a grainy shot of a sunset, but as she scrolled through the tagged photos from a decade ago, her heart stopped. There she was. Younger, with fiery auburn hair and a wide, confident smile. And standing next to her, arm draped possessively around her shoulder, was Ben. The caption, posted by a mutual friend, read, "College sweethearts take on homecoming." Sarah's breath left her in a ragged gasp. It wasn't a coincidence. It was her. A cold, methodical fury began to burn through her shock. She needed more. She needed something tangible, something from his life, not the digital ghost of a life lived 10 years ago. Her mind raced, sifting through the house. The attic. Ben kept a few boxes of old college things up there, memorabilia he'd called dust collectors, but had never been willing to throw away. With Leo napping, Sarah pulled down the rickety attic stairs. The air upstairs was hot and smelled of dust and aging paper. She found the boxes easily, labeled UVA, in Ben's precise architectural script. She tore through the first one, textbooks and old t-shirts. The second held photo albums. She flipped through the plastic-covered pages, a voyeur to her husband's past. And there, tucked into the back sleeve of the final album, was a small, hardbound book, his senior yearbook. Her fingers trembled as she opened it. She didn't need the index. She flipped straight to the candid photos section, and on page 214, she found it. A full-page spread on student couples. Ben and Jessica were in the center, laughing, leaning against a brick wall on campus. The caption beneath was the final nail in the coffin. Architecture major Ben Carter and art history's Jessica Riley, inseparable for 2 years, planned to move to Chicago together after graduation. a plan he'd never mentioned, a future he'd erased from his personal history. Sarah sank back on her heels, the heavy book in her lap, the dust motes dancing in the single shaft of light from the attic window. He hadn't just lied about knowing Leo's birth mother. He had meticulously curated his past, presenting her with a version of himself that was a complete fabrication. That evening, the tension in the house was a living thing. Sarah set the table, her movements sharp and deliberate. Every clink of silverware on ceramic sounded like an accusation. She watched Ben play with Leo on the floor, his laughter echoing in the quiet room. The scene that would have filled her with love yesterday now looked grotesque, a performance for an audience of one. During dinner, after Leo was in bed, Sarah took a steadying breath. She had to know, she had to see his face when he lied. "You know," she began, her voice a carefully constructed imitation of casualness, "Chloe was telling me about a friend of hers from college who just got a big promotion. It's funny how people from your past just pop up. It got me thinking, do you ever wonder what happened to Jessica Riley?" She watched him, her eyes narrowed, searching for a single crack in his composure. For a split second, she saw it. His fork stilled its journey to his mouth. A flicker of something, panic, annoyance, crossed his eyes before being instantly suppressed. His mask of perfect husband slid back into place. He took a slow bite of pasta, chewed, and swallowed before answering. "Jessica Riley? Wow, that's a name I haven't heard in a long time." He shook his head, a small, dismissive smile playing on his lips. "Haven't thought about her in a decade. I hope she's doing well." The lie was flawless, smooth, practiced. It was the ease of it that broke her. He didn't hesitate. He didn't stumble. He simply erased her again with a calm, deliberate falsehood. Sarah looked down at her plate, the food tasteless in her mouth. The whispers of doubt had become a roar. Her husband was a stranger, and she was living in a house he had built on a foundation of lies. Ben's perfect, effortless lie echoed in the silence of the house for the rest of the night. It was a declaration. It told Sarah that he was not just a man with a secret, but a man who was prepared and able to defend that secret at all costs. The suspicion that had been a creeping vine was now a thick, choking forest, and she knew she couldn't just live in it. She had to find a way out, and the only way out was through. The next morning, the routine was the same, but the actress had improved. Sarah's smile was less brittle, her kiss goodbye more convincing. She had a plan, a desperate, half-formed thing, but it was a plan nonetheless. The moment Ben's car disappeared down the street, she went straight to his desk. The manila envelope was still there. Yesterday, she had only looked at the corrected summary. Today, she needed the entire file. She slid the contents onto the desk. The original adoption petition, the home study report, and tucked behind them, a document she had never seen. It was the birth mother's intake form, the one Jessica herself would have filled out for the agency. And on it, in a section that should have been redacted, was her last known address. An apartment in Havenwood, their old college town, a 2-hour drive away. A tremor ran through her hands. This was it. This was the road to the truth. She looked at the playpen, where Leo was happily stacking colorful rings. Her heart ached. This wasn't just about Ben's lie anymore. It was about Leo. Who was he? What were the true circumstances of his birth? She was his mother, and she knew nothing. Under the guise of a spontaneous trip to a historic village near Havenwood that she'd always wanted to see, she packed a diaper bag, buckled a cheerful Leo into his car seat, and started the engine. The drive was a blur of green highway signs and gray asphalt. Her mind wasn't on the road. It was replaying a decade of memories, scrutinizing them for other lies, other inconsistencies. Every loving gesture from Ben, every shared dream, was now tainted, suspect. Had he been planning this for months? Years? Was their entire struggle with infertility just a convenient stage for his elaborate play? She pulled into Havenwood just after noon. The town was a time capsule of their college years, the familiar brick buildings and leafy quads stirring a nostalgia that now felt bitter. She bypassed the campus and followed her phone's GPS into a less idyllic part of town. The address from the file led her to a rundown three-story apartment complex with peeling paint and rusting balcony railings. The Copley Arms. It looked like a place for transient lives, for people just starting out or starting over. Sarah parked across the street, shielded by the low-hanging branches of an oak tree. She cut the engine, and the silence in the car was suddenly immense. Leo had fallen asleep in the back, his chest rising and falling in a peaceful rhythm that felt like a mockery of the storm raging inside her. What was she even doing here? What would she say? "Hi, you don't know me, but I'm raising your son, and I think my husband, your ex-boyfriend, might have lied to both of us." The words were insane. For nearly an hour, she just sat there, a prisoner in her own car, her heart pounding a frantic, unsteady beat against her ribs. People came and went from the building, a student with a backpack, a young mother juggling grocery bags. Then, the main door opened, and a woman stepped out, pausing on the top step to check her phone. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. The hair was the same fiery auburn from the photographs, though it was now pulled back in a messy bun. The woman was thinner, her face etched with a weariness that the smiling college girl in the pictures had never known. But it was her, Jessica Riley. Jessica slipped her phone into her pocket and walked toward a dented blue sedan parked a few spots down from Sarah. This was the moment. Now or never. Sarah's hand flew to the door handle, her muscles tensing to push it open. But she froze. A wave of fear, cold and paralyzing, washed over her. Fear of the truth. Fear of what this woman's story would do to the fragile remnants of her life. Fear for the sleeping boy in the back seat, whose world was about to be irrevocably broken. She couldn't do it. Not like this. Confronting Jessica here, ambushing her on a random Tuesday, felt wrong. It was an act of desperation, not strength. And Jessica wasn't the source of the lie. She was just another victim of it. The architect was at home, probably sitting in his corner office overlooking the city, believing his perfect crime was still perfect. Watching Jessica's car pull away and disappear around the corner, Sarah's indecision hardened into a cold, diamond-hard resolve. Her quest wasn't for Jessica anymore. It was for Ben. She needed to face him, not with suspicions or old photographs, but with the full weight of his deceit. She had seen the lie's address. Now she needed to hear the confession from its author. She started the car, her movements calm and deliberate. The fear was gone, replaced by a quiet, chilling fury. The 2-hour drive home wouldn't be a journey of frantic worry. It would be a countdown to demolition. The drive back was a silent, focused pilgrimage from one life to the next. Sarah didn't turn on the radio. The only sounds were the hum of the tires on the asphalt and Leo's soft babbling from the back seat. With every mile that passed, the grief and confusion of the past 2 days were being forged into something new. A cold, sharp-edged certainty. The woman who pulled into their driveway that afternoon was not the same one who had left that morning. She carried a sleeping Leo inside and put him down for his nap, her movements gentle and automatic. Then she walked back into the living room, the heart of their shared life, and began to set the stage. She went to the attic and retrieved the yearbook, leaving it open on the kitchen island to the picture of Ben and Jessica, their smiling faces a monument to a buried past. Beside it, she placed the uncensored adoption file from the manila envelope, fanned out so that Jessica Riley's name and Havenwood address were clearly visible. It was a simple, brutal diorama of his betrayal. Then, she sat on one of the kitchen stools and waited. The house was quiet, the air thick with anticipation. She felt strangely calm, the way a person does in the eye of a hurricane. The storm was coming. There was no sense in panicking now. An hour later, she heard the familiar rumble of Ben's car, the click of the garage door. He walked in through the kitchen, whistling softly, a grocery bag in one hand. "Hey, you're back early," he began, then stopped dead. His eyes landed on the kitchen island. The whistle died on his lips. For a long moment, he didn't move. Sarah watched as the color drained from his face, his charming, easygoing mask disintegrating in real time. He slowly set the grocery bag on the floor. His gaze darted from the yearbook to the adoption papers, then finally to her face. His eyes, usually so warm and open, were guarded, panicked. "Sarah, what is this?" he asked, his voice a strained whisper. "I believe the term for it is evidence," she replied, her own voice devoid of emotion. It was a cold, flat thing. The agency sent a corrected file. A clerical error. Ironic, isn't it? He took a step forward, his hands raised in a placating gesture. "Honey, let me explain. It's not what it looks like." A harsh, humorless laugh escaped her lips. "Isn't it? It looks like our son's birth mother is your college girlfriend. The one you haven't thought about in a decade. It looks like you lied to me, Ben. Every single day, for years." "No, I didn't. I mean, it's complicated." He was stumbling now, the smooth liar from the other night gone, replaced by a cornered man scrambling for an exit. I was going to tell you." "When, Ben?" she shot back, her voice rising. "When were you going to tell me? On his 10th birthday? His 18th? Or were you just going to let me live out my entire life inside this performance you directed?" He finally reached the island, his hands gripping the cool granite edge as if to steady himself. His denial crumbled. "Jessica called me," he said, the words coming out in a rush. "About a year and a half ago. She found my office number online. She was in trouble, Sarah, pregnant, scared. She didn't know what to do. Sarah just stared at him, her silence a demand for the rest of the story. "We were on the wait list," he continued, his voice pleading. "We'd been on it for years. More failed treatments, more heartbreak. I looked at you, and you were so fragile. I thought I was losing you. And then this. It felt like a sign, a solution, a way to fix everything." The word solution landed like a punch to the gut. A solution?" she repeated, her voice trembling with rage. "Leo wasn't a problem to be solved. He's a child. Our child." "He is!" Ben insisted, his eyes wild with desperation. "That's the point. I arranged a private adoption. I told Jessica it was the best way, that it had to be anonymous. I told her the agency would handle it, but I handled it. I paid the lawyers. I set it all up. And when the match came through, it was him. It was our son Sarah finally stood, the chair scraping loudly against the floor. The confession was so much worse than she could have imagined. It wasn't a passive lie of omission. It was an active, meticulously constructed fraud. "So you bought him," she said, the words tasting like ash. "You bought your own son, and you sold him to me as our last best hope." "No! Don't say that!" he shouted, his fist slamming down on the counter. "I did it for us. I couldn't lose you, Sarah. I was so terrified you'd leave me if we couldn't have a family. This was a way to give you the baby you wanted, a child who was a part of me, a part of us, finally. I did it because I love you." That was the final devastating blow. He wasn't a monster in his own mind. He was a hero. He had twisted his profound selfishness, his fear, his deceit, into an act of love. He had built their beautiful family home on a toxic, hidden fault line, and he was trying to convince her that the tremors she felt were just the house settling. But Sarah knew better. It wasn't settling, it was collapsing, and he had just handed her the detonator. The echo of Ben's twisted justification, "I did it for us," hung in the air between them, a toxic vapor. Sarah stared at the man she thought she knew, but all she saw was a stranger wearing her husband's face. The love and trust she had felt for him had curdled into something cold and unrecognizable. She couldn't breathe the same air as him, not for one more second. Without another word, she turned and walked toward the nursery. Leo was stirring, his soft coos a stark contrast to the ugliness that had just unfolded. She packed a diaper bag with numb efficiency, her hands moving on autopilot. Clothes, diapers, wipes, his favorite stuffed giraffe. Then she went to her own closet, pulling a duffel bag from the top shelf and throwing in a random assortment of clothes. Ben followed her, his voice a low, desperate litany of apologies and explanations. "Sarah, please. Don't do this. We can talk about this. We can fix this." She didn't respond. She zipped the bag with a sharp, final tug and picked up a sleeping Leo from his crib, holding him tight against her chest, as if to shield him from the poison in the house. "Where are you going?" Ben demanded, blocking her path in the hallway. "I don't know," she said, her voice flat, "but I can't be here." "He's my son, Sarah." "You made him a secret," she shot back, her eyes meeting his with a glacial calm. "And now I don't know what he is. But I know I can't be your wife." She pushed past him. He didn't try to stop her again. He just stood there, defeated, as she walked out the front door, closing it softly behind her. The click of the latch felt like a final, irrevocable severing. In the car, with Leo secured in his seat, the adrenaline gave way to a wave of nauseating shock. Her hands trembled on the steering wheel. She had nowhere to go. Then she thought of Chloe. Practical, no-nonsense, fiercely loyal Chloe. Her best friend, her lawyer. She fumbled for her phone and called her. "Sarah? What's wrong?" "You sound awful," Chloe answered, her sharp voice instantly cutting through Sarah's haze. Can Leo and I come over?" Sarah managed to ask, her voice cracking. "Something's happened." "Don't even ask. Just come." Chloe's apartment was a sanctuary of clean lines and calm neutrality. She took one look at Sarah's tear-streaked face and the sleeping baby in her arms, and wordlessly guided them inside. Over a cup of tea she forced into Sarah's shaking hands. The whole sordid story came tumbling out. The letter, the yearbook, the drive to Havenwood, the horrifying confession. Chloe listened without interruption, her expression hardening from concern to a steely, professional anger. "The man is a calculating fraud," she said when Sarah finished, the legal term sounding both clinical and perfectly accurate. "He didn't just lie, Sarah. He likely committed adoption fraud. He falsified documents. He misrepresented the process to you, to the state, and almost certainly to Jessica." "I need proof," Sarah whispered, the thought solidifying in her mind. "See, it can't just be my word against his." "He'll twist it. He'll make me sound crazy." Chloe nodded, her mind already working. "His finances?" "A private adoption of that complexity. It costs a fortune. Lawyers, birth mother expenses. He couldn't have paid for it out of our joint account without you noticing." "His laptop," Sarah said, her eyes lighting with a grim purpose. "He keeps everything on his laptop." He has a separate account for his business. She knew the password, his college dog's name. Another detail from a past she now realized was a work of fiction. While Chloe put Leo, who had woken up, into a travel cot in her spare room, Sarah got to work. Ben's laptop bag was in the back of her car. She retrieved it, sat at Chloe's dining table, and logged in. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat of fear and adrenaline. This felt like a violation, a line she'd never thought she would cross. But Ben had dynamited all the lines. She found the banking portal for his business account. For months, she scrolled through payroll, material costs, client invoices, the normal rhythm of his work. Then she saw it. 18 months ago. A wire transfer for $50,000 to a Dalton and Finch Legal Services. She'd never heard of them. It wasn't their adoption agency's legal team. Following that, a series of monthly transfers, $5,000 every month for 10 months, to a private checking account under the name J. Riley. The final, irrefutable proof. The blueprint of his betrayal, laid out in dollars and cents. She quickly began downloading the statements to a thumb drive Chloe had given her. Just as the last file was transferring, she heard a sound that made her blood run cold. The buzz of the apartment intercom. Chloe went to answer it, her body tensing. "Who is it?" Ben's voice, distorted and tinny through the speaker, filled the room. "Chloe, it's Ben." "I know she's here. Please, just let me talk to my wife, Chloe," shot Sarah a panicked look. "He must have tracked your phone." Sarah's hands flew across the keyboard, ejecting the drive and shoving it into her pocket. She slammed the laptop shut just as Chloe's voice, firm and unwavering, came through the intercom. "She doesn't want to see you, Ben. You need to leave. Chloe, don't do this." From the window, Sarah saw his car idling on the street below. Chloe stood like a sentinel at her door, a tense standoff playing out between two floors. Sarah grabbed the laptop, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm of near discovery. He was here. The architect of the lie was trying to break into her sanctuary. She had the proof in her pocket, but for the first time, she truly understood how dangerous the man she married might be. Ben eventually left, defeated by Chloe's unyielding refusal to let him inside. But his presence lingered, a threatening shadow that confirmed Sarah's fears. He wasn't just going to let her go. He would fight, and he would use the story he'd so carefully crafted to his advantage. The bank statements on the thumb drive in her pocket were a weapon, but Sarah knew they only told one part of the story. She had Ben's version, the twisted, self-serving confession of a man trying to save himself. To truly understand the scope of his manipulation, she needed to hear the other side. She needed to talk to Jessica Riley. Dalton and Finch Legal Services, Sarah said, looking at Chloe. The ones he wired the $50,000 to. That must be the firm that handled the private adoption. Chloe was already at her desk, her laptop open. If he hired them, they represented him. But they were the intermediary. They'll have Jessica's contact information. A few clicks, and a search through a legal database later, Chloe had a phone number for the firm's main office. They won't just give me her number, Sarah said, her hope deflating. Client confidentiality. They won't give it to you, Chloe said with a thin smile. But they might give it to an associate from another firm following up on a related case. She picked up her phone, her voice shifting into a smooth, professional tone that Sarah had seen her use in court. She spoke with a confidence that brooked no argument, referencing case files that didn't exist and legal statutes with practiced ease. 10 minutes later, she hung up and wrote a phone number on a sticky note. Jessica Riley, she said, sliding it across the table. Sarah stared at the 10 digits. They felt like a code to unlock the final, darkest room of her husband's deception. Her own phone felt impossibly heavy in her hand. What if Jessica refused to talk? What if she was part of the lie? You have to call, Chloe urged gently. You need her story. For you, for Leo, and for court. Taking a deep, shaky breath, Sarah dialed the number. It rang 3 times, each chime echoing the frantic beat of her heart. Hello? A woman's voice answered, tentative and soft. Is this Jessica Riley? Sarah asked, her own voice barely a whisper. Who is this? My name is Sarah Carter. Well, Sarah Miller, she corrected herself, the name Carter tasting like poison. I'm Ben Carter's wife. A sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line. Then silence. For a moment, Sarah thought she'd hung up. I know about the adoption, Sarah said, forcing the words out. I know Leo is your son. I need to understand what happened. Please, can we meet? Another long pause. Then the voice, fragile and laced with a deep, resonating sadness. Where? They agreed on a neutral location, a quiet, unassuming cafe in a suburban town halfway between Havenwood and the city. The next day, Chloe insisted on coming with her, waiting in the car with Leo while Sarah went inside. The cafe was nearly empty. Sarah chose a small booth in the corner and ordered a coffee she knew she wouldn't drink. A few minutes later, the bell above the door chimed. Jessica Riley walked in. In person, she looked even more worn down than she had from across the street. There were dark circles under her eyes, and she held herself with a protective tension, as if expecting a blow. She slid into the booth opposite Sarah, her hands clutching a worn handbag in her lap. I never wanted this to happen, she began, her voice trembling. Ben told me you called him, Sarah started, needing to anchor the conversation in the one fact she thought she knew. Jessica shook her head, a bitter smile touching her lips. Of course he did. Number. He called me. I'd lost my job at the gallery. I was a few months pregnant. My ex was long gone, and I was panicking. I posted something vague on social media about being in a tough spot. An old college friend must have told him. A week later, he called me out of the blue. The first crack in Ben's narrative appeared. He hadn't been a passive recipient of a desperate call. He had been actively seeking an opportunity. He was so kind, Jessica continued, her gaze distant. He offered to help. He said he and his wife, you, had been trying for years. He painted this picture of you, this fragile, heartbroken woman, on the verge of a breakdown. He said a direct, private adoption would be a gift, a noble act to save your marriage and give my son the perfect life I couldn't provide. Every word was a twisting knife in Sarah's gut. Ben had used her pain, her years of infertility, as a tool to manipulate this vulnerable woman. He paid for everything, Jessica said, looking down at her hands. My rent, my bills, my medical expenses. He set me up with his lawyers, Dalton and Finch. They told me everything had to be completely anonymous to protect you, to protect your fragile emotional state. They said you couldn't handle knowing who I was. I felt so isolated, so dependent on him. I signed the papers because he convinced me it was the only right and decent thing to do. The most loving choice I could make for my baby. Tears welled in her eyes. I had no idea he was lying to you. I thought I was helping another woman, not being used as an instrument in a deception against her. He told me you were both so grateful. Sarah felt a wave of nausea. She looked at this woman, not as a rival or a ghost from her husband's past, but as a fellow victim. Ben had put them on opposite sides of a chessboard, moving them like pawns in his own sick game. He had preyed on Jessica's desperation and on Sarah's love, all to serve his own selfish needs. He lied to both of us, Sarah said, her voice thick with a strange mix of anger and empathy. Jessica nodded, a single tear tracing a path down her cheek. He built a family on two broken hearts. In that quiet cafe, over an untouched cup of coffee, the full, monstrous scope of the betrayal was finally laid bare. The two women, brought together by the same man's lies, found a moment of somber, shared understanding. The foundation of Sarah's life was not just cracked, it had been built over a chasm, and she was finally seeing how deep it went. Sarah left the cafe with a chilling clarity. The empathy she felt for Jessica had solidified the rage she felt toward Ben. His betrayal wasn't a single, desperate act. It was a campaign of calculated cruelty against two women. Armed with the full truth, she knew what she had to do. There would be no more discussion, no more pleading, no more chances. There would only be an ending. She drove back to Chloe's apartment, her hands steady on the wheel. "I'm going back to the house," she announced as she walked in. Chloe looked up, alarmed. "Sarah, I don't think that's a good idea." "He doesn't know what you've found out. He could be unpredictable. I'm not going back to talk. I'm going to pack." "For good," Sarah said, her voice hard as steel. "I need to get my things, and more importantly, Leo's things. His crib, his clothes, everything that makes a place a home for him. I will not let Ben turn this into a drawn-out battle where he holds our son's life hostage. I'm drawing the line tonight." Chloe saw the resolve in her eyes and nodded slowly. "Okay, but I'm coming with you. I'll wait in the car. You call 911 if he even raises his voice, and you call me the second you're done." She handed Sarah a business card. "This is David Chen. He's the best family law attorney I know, a real shark. Call him when it's over." When Sarah pulled into the driveway, Ben's car was there. A knot of anxiety tightened in her stomach, but she pushed it down. She unbuckled Leo, held him close, and walked to the front door she had fled less than 2 days ago. Ben opened it before she could put her key in the lock. His face was a mixture of relief and hope. "Sarah! Thank God. I've been so worried. Let's talk, please." "There's nothing to talk about, Ben," she said, walking past him into the house. "I'm here for my things, and for Leo's." She put Leo in his playpen with a few toys and turned to face her husband. The pleading look on his face vanished, replaced by a dawning panic. "What are you talking about? You can't just leave," he said, his voice rising. "This is our home. We are a family. This is a house, Ben." "It stopped being a home when I found out it was built on a lie," she said, her voice remaining level and cold. She turned and walked toward the stairs. He followed her, his desperation mounting with every step she took. "I made a mistake, a terrible mistake, but I did it from a place of love. Can't you see that? She ignored him, entering their bedroom and pulling her empty duffel bag from the closet. She began methodically taking clothes from drawers and hangers, folding them with a detached precision. His pleading turned to anger. He grabbed her arm. "Stop ignoring me! You can't do this. Leo is my son, Sarah, my biological son. You can't just take him away from me." That was the line. She stopped what she was doing and turned to face him, her eyes blazing with a fire he had never seen before. She pulled her arm free from his grasp. "Your biological son?" she repeated, her voice dangerously quiet. "He was supposed to be our son. You used your biology as a weapon. You used him as a tool to lie to me, to manipulate a desperate woman, and to build this fraudulent life because you were too much of a coward to face our problems honestly. You gave up your right to be his father when you made him the cornerstone of a crime." Ben stared at her, momentarily stunned into silence by her ferocity. She wasn't the fragile, heartbroken woman he had described to Jessica. She was someone else entirely. "I'm leaving, Ben," she said, her voice clear and final. "And I'm taking Leo with me." "You can't!" he snarled, his face contorting with rage and fear. "I will fight you. I'll tell them he's mine." Contorting with rage, "I'll tell them you're unstable. No court will take a son away from his biological father." Sarah held his gaze, unblinking. She calmly reached into her pocket and pulled out her phone. Ben's face paled, thinking she was calling the police. She dialed the number from the business card Chloe had given her. "Hello? Is this David Chen?" she asked, her voice perfectly composed. "My name is Sarah Miller. Chloe Vance referred me. I need to file for an emergency custody order and a restraining order, effective immediately. My husband has admitted to orchestrating a fraudulent adoption to deceive me into raising his biological child." She watched Ben's face as she spoke. Every word she uttered was a blow, dismantling his power, brick by brick. The rage drained out of him, replaced by a look of utter, hollowed-out defeat. His threats were empty. His control was an illusion. He had built his entire world on a lie, and with one phone call, she had just set it on fire. He finally understood. He hadn't just lost his wife. He had lost everything. 1 year later, the world was quieter. The cacophony of betrayal and legal battles had faded into a steady, peaceful rhythm. Sarah's new life was smaller, simpler, and more authentically hers than the grand, hollow life she had left behind. She and Leo lived in a 2-bedroom apartment in a town 30 miles away, a place with no memories of Ben, a place where they could build their own foundation, one honest day at a time. The final scene of her old life had been swift and brutal. Armed with Jessica's testimony and Ben's financial records, David Chen had secured the emergency orders. The divorce was a demolition. Ben's admission of fraud, a fact he could not escape, rendered his claims to custody powerless. He had built the cage, and in the end, he was the one trapped inside it. Today was a Saturday in late October. The air was crisp, and the sun cast a warm, golden glow on the park. Sarah pushed a now 2-year-old Leo on a swing, his delighted giggles soaring into the bright blue sky with every push. He was a whirlwind of toddler energy, his vocabulary expanding daily, his personality a brilliant, shining thing. He was the center of her universe, the unwavering truth in a world that had once been filled with lies. She looked at him, and her heart felt not the ache of past trauma, but the simple, profound fullness of a mother's love. Her smile was genuine, reaching her eyes, a sign of a peace she had fought for and won. A familiar car pulled into the parking lot. Sarah's posture stiffened slightly, an involuntary echo of past anxieties, but she didn't stop pushing the swing. Ben got out of the car. He looked diminished. The sharp, confident edges of the successful architect had been worn down, replaced by a permanent weariness. He had lost his prestigious job in the fallout of the scandal, his reputation in their old social circle shattered. He now worked for a smaller firm, his ambition seemingly extinguished. The court had granted him supervised visitation, twice a month, in a public place. It was their second meeting this month. "Hey, buddy," he said, his voice quiet as he approached the swing set. Leo looked at him with the frank, curious gaze of a child for a familiar, but not quite central figure in his life. Ben, he said simply. Ben's face flickered with a brief, pained expression at the absence of Daddy, but he quickly covered it. He had lost that title in a courtroom. He knelt and offered Leo a small, bright red truck. I brought you something. Leo took it, immediately engrossed. The interaction was brief, stilted, and performed under Sarah's watchful eye. For 15 minutes, Ben pushed the swing and helped Leo down the slide, his movements awkward. The easy, natural tenderness he once had with his son gone, replaced by the self-conscious caution of a visitor. He was a footnote in his son's life, a consequence of his own making. When the time was up, he hugged Leo goodbye, a gesture the boy tolerated more than returned, and walked back to his car alone. As Sarah watched him drive away, she felt not triumph, but a quiet, somber pity. He had been so terrified of losing her that he had guaranteed it, destroying the very family he had tried to forge through deceit. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. It was a text. She opened it to see a picture of a smiling woman with auburn hair standing in front of a small art gallery. My first show, the text read. Couldn't have done it without you. Give my little guy a squeeze. Love, Aunt Jessie. Sarah smiled. After the divorce, she had done the one thing Ben never could. She had told the truth. Slowly, carefully, she had built a new, unconventional family for Leo. Jessica had moved to a nearby city to be closer, taking a job at a gallery and rediscovering the passion Ben's manipulation had nearly extinguished. She was not a secret or a threat. She was Aunt Jessie, a loving, present figure in Leo's life. She came for holidays, sent birthday cards, and received a steady stream of photos and videos from Sarah. They were two women, bound by a child they both loved, navigating a future they were building together on their own terms. Sarah texted back a picture of Leo, his face smeared with dirt, proudly holding up his new red truck. A moment later, a reply came through. A single heart emoji. Sarah slipped the phone back into her pocket and gave the swing another gentle push. The chains creaked rhythmically. Leo's laughter filled the air. This life wasn't the one she had dreamed of all those years ago in sterile clinics and quiet, hopeful nights. It was better. It was real.